I'm still on part one. A poet and a musician. A poet and a musician, part one, continuation one. As we spoke earlier in part one, the last thing we talked about was the core similarities. We talked about the master of rhythms, the architect of sound, and capturing the spirit of the age, the spirit of the time. So that's what we ended with in part one of the introduction, core similarities. So the next point I'm going to bring up in part one, continuation one, is the key differences. So that's where we're going to start on in this continuation of part one. Key differences. While the poet and the musician's purposes align, their tools and constraints differ significantly. Their tools and constraint differs significantly. Let's think about the feature, the poet, and the musician. Medium. Medium is very important to understand. Language, for example, is the medium the poet uses. Words on pages, on paper, or spoken. Think about that, right? The medium that is used for the poet is words and spoken or written. When we think about sound for the musician, notes, chords, timbre, often combined with words. As a lyricist myself, when I was first taught how to write rhythms, I was also given the task to write words that goes with it. I was young then, but I can remember those particular lessons. Not knowing that I was going to be a songwriter, but it was just part of the lesson to write the words with the syllables that goes with the rhythm. I had a wonderful mentor. His name is Cecil Lloyd. Passed. He was a genius. So I've always remember how he would instruct me to write not only the rhythm as a musician, but the words as a songwriter. But I never called myself a songwriter then. All I wanted was the music part. So when we think about the key differences, as much as we thought about the core similarities earlier in part one, we have to also think about the medium and the differences in terms of how the poet uses the medium to convey the message or the story. Language, sound. In language, the poet uses words on a page or it is spoken. And we talked about flow, rhythm and flow earlier, rhyme and flow. And we also talked about rhythm, syncopation, and so on, as we did earlier. Now, abstract versus concrete. Abstract. In the previous discussion in the core similarities, we talked about the idea of something being received. But unless it is expressed, it is written, the audience won't know what you're talking about. Similarly for the musician has to write out what he hears in his mind for the audience to appreciate it. So abstract versus concrete, primarily concrete, while poetry can be abstract, of course it is, and can be, while poetry can be abstract, it relies on semantic meaning. It relies on semantic meaning. The word heart. The word heart has a specific definition and also a cultural weight to it. So when we think about something that is abstract, that no one's know but yourself because it's in your mind, we have to know how to make it also semantically correct, give meaning to the words that are being used. So as a poet, the word you choose is very critical to convey the meaning or the imagery of the poem. For example, I'll give you a good example. My son called me up not long ago and he said, "Dad, I have this idea." And he was so excited. And I'm waiting for him to tell me what this idea is, because he's excited. I'm excited that he has an idea. So we were both excited. Because we were both excited, he never told me about what the idea was. He just said, "Oh, this idea, I had it, I got it, I received it." And then we talked about something else. But you know what he did? He later texted me and said, after we hung up on the phone with the excitement of he's got an idea, he texted me and said, "Dad, the bass line, I got the bass line down. It's in D minor, it's in D." Yeah, so I said, okay, now I know what the idea is all about. So from the abstract, he gave me something concrete that I could now relate to. And that is the primary idea of what you say, well, is primarily an abstract thought for the musician. For the musician. Music can convey sadness without a single word. Music can convey sadness without a single word. Now, some people say, well, if the music is written in a major, it's happy. If it's written in a minor key, it is sad. Well, I know some minor key songs that are happy, but it's how the story is being told through the melody, how the musician is conveying the message. The poet is using his words and the devices given to make that sound, to tell that story, to convey the message And don't forget, it's also cultural. Different culture will take that same message and translate it totally differently. So it all depends on who, what, where, when, and how. So when we think about the musician or the poet, and I know some poets who are fantastic songwriters, and some poets are just pure words. They don't think about writing a song, but a songwriter could listen to a poem and say, "Wow, I could take that that poem and translate it into a song, into lyrics." So they're brilliant lyricists that could do that. So as we consider these modus operandi, the method the poet uses and the method the musician uses, it's like there's a crossfade, like a thin line, but yet they approach it differently, words and instrument. Now, like I said, music can convey sadness, yes, without a single word, and that is true. And whether we think about a major key or a minor key, it matters. To be quite honest, it matters how you feel to convey the method, the story, to tell that story. So whatever you're going to do, make sure you have an understanding that whatever you hear, don't keep it locked up in your mind, because no one else will know what you're talking about. Let's look at collaboration. Collaboration usually is a solitary craft. Solitary craft, a poet writes alone many times, many nights. A poet can sit down and just looking at the moon, looking at a picture. For example, I was writing a ekphrastic poem based on my granddaughter's artwork from she was a child. It fascinates me even now because I wrote a series of poems based on just that one image. So how we visualize objects and the perspective we take from that particular object in different at different angles gives you a different perspective. So think about how you're going to collaborate with an object for the object is a finished product, of course, yes, it is. The artwork of my granddaughter is a finished work. But she did this when she was 3 years old, and yet it still fascinates me today. For me to write a poem in today's vocabulary. When I saw the artwork first, I wasn't thinking about a poem. But now it's part of who I am. What I do is look at objects, people, place, and things, and try and find or convey music. The musicality that I see within an artwork is as fascinating to me as extrapolated from that artwork a poem. So, as a musician, might write a song. Yes, I could write a song. Yeah, I become a songwriter. As a musician, I might write a song that convey all these different emotions. But the final recording involves a producer, a drummer, a bassist, just like what I have here. See? And an engineer. The performance is often considered the art form. So as a performer, I'm taking the words that I've written, putting the music to it. I have some cats play with me. You know, we go into the studio. In today's technology, you know, one person could go into their studio and just record all the parts, given that the person is a multifaceted individual in terms of instrumentality, musicality, and poetry. So given all these different areas of expertise, one can produce a record. Now, time and decay. Time and decay. Let's think about time and decay. Poetry is archival. Let's say that. A poem written in 1609, Shakespeare's sonnet, exists today exactly as it was intended. Shakespeare, 1609. 1609 work, because it was archival, it was able to be performed today exactly as it was intended. Music is ephemeral and performance-based. Music has to be performed. You can record it. While recording exists, yes, a piece of music lives in its interpretation. You can record a piece of music, yes, but it lives within its interpretation. Someone else can record it, interpret it differently. As the original author of that piece, someone take that, play it totally different. Might even put a few notes here and there, some glissando here and there. But it's nonetheless the performance. So, playing a piece of music lives in its interpretation. A jazz standard sound, radically different depending on who is playing it when. I have some musicians that I play with. Ask them to play, let's say, Autumn Leaves. Everybody knows Autumn Leaves. But depending on who is playing it, can jazz it up. And others might just make it calm. But you got some cats that could take it to another level. They could take it outside of the normal box in which Autumn Leaves is framed, depending on who is playing it. Now, let's look at accessibility. That's the other area. accessibility. Accessibility requires literacy and focused attention. Literacy and focused attention. You must sit with a poem, often reading lines to unpack meaning. You know, I've got a book of poems. I've got poems, you know, from different authors. Langston Hughes. Yeah, Langston Hughes. I got Todd McKay. Oh, so many poets that I've read during my time. You know, and I felt so versed, but yet I'm still learning. I'm still studying. I'm still reading. I'm still practicing. It never stopped. So to focus attention when you sit with a poem, you must sit with it. Read it, read each line and get an understanding, unpacking meaning. Because each person who reads a poem unpacked it in a different way based on culture and tradition. Now, more viscerally, let's look at the music. Music then bypasses intellectual brain and hits the limbic system. Music bypasses the intellectual brain and hits the limbic system, emotional brain. When you put your headphones on and you just start to listen to that music, it's like you're in a zone, you're somewhere. Instantly, you travel someplace. Instantly, you put that music on and you're locked out of everything around you. It's like you transported somewhere far. That's what music done. So again, to conclude here in this continuation part of part 1, the key differences. We also want to just look briefly at the historical divide and convergence. This comparison, I've always thought, is often framed by historical shifts. The ancient views, for example, they were the same. Technology might have changed, but the views might not. In ancient Greece, for example, there was no distinction between a poet like Homer or Sappho, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. Individually was a maker. See, the poem, as a poet, you're making these words work in such unique way. And that's critical, important. You know, by back then, historically, they had an instrument, a lyre that they would play. It's an historical instrument. You know, it's so old, it's older than me. It's a biblical instrument, I call it. You know, Lyre, a lyre. See, so these instruments, it's like open to play different strings, like a harp. So you can go and look that up. Poetry was a form of music. Poetry was a form of music back then. And music was a form of poetry. So there wasn't any separation. It's just we in modern times separate the two. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about listening to a poet performance or a musical performance, and appreciate the art, appreciate the artists and their craft. And like I said, April is the month for the celebration of poetry. April is also the appreciation of jazz. So thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope I did it justice, because I just love doing this thing. I just love to teach. I love to talk about things that deals with the art, the craft. I love talking about poetry, music, verse, whatever it is. I just love giving something back. And as the month of April is the time of year that all these two genres come together, I would also add that it's also the month autism is focused on also. But I don't know much about that organization as I do know about poetry and jazz. So I hope you participate in activities for poetry, jazz, music, and also look into the autism areas and support that also. So I do appreciate you listening to me, and thank you. Once again, my name is Lester G. Smith, aka Netta Smith, a poet, a musician, and an educator. Thank you once again.